Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and if you can take your seats, please. If you can squeeze along if there's room, or there's some seats at the front, and there's a couple of seats next to me on the stage if anyone wants to sit there. But welcome to Automotive Logistics UK 2017. My name's Louis Yakumi, and 20 years ago this month, well, this month stroke last month, I launched the very first issue of Automotive Logistics magazine. So it's great to have been, consistent doing this for 20 years. And as you know, the Automotive Logistics Group are now publishers of two magazines, Automotive Logistics and Finished Vehicle Logistics magazines, and we're organisers of the Automotive Logistics Global series of conferences that are held in Mexico, China, Europe, Brazil, Russia, India, the USA, and at last, here in the UK. And it's great to be here at the Grove, a fantastic hotel and great venue here. This is actually the hotel, and genuinely, I'm not sure people believed me when I said it at the cocktail reception last night. This is actually the hotel that the England footballers often stay during the international breaks and when they're playing at Wembley. And they are actually here now. And just so you know, I don't know if any of you noticed that the England footballers about 30 minutes ago drove off to go training. So I'd just like to let you know that that means that the wags, the wife and girlfriends, are now hanging around the hotel. So please don't leave your seats. At least be less obvious if you're going to be tested. And for anyone who's interested, the footballers will be back in the afternoon. So if anyone wants to become a wag, they'll be back this afternoon. And football's not the only great British invention. The other is the Mini car. So I hope those of you who went to the Mini plant tour enjoyed it. I also have some connections with the Mini. My first car was an original Mini, a red Mini. And I've also got a personal connection with the designer, Alec Isigonis, because as you can see from his Wikipedia page, like me, he was also known as a Greek god by his team. I hope that you enjoyed the great drinks reception last night, which was hosted by GBA. It was good to see the noise that was there, the vibes, the networking business that was already being done there. It's only our second UK conference. When the Automotive Logistics UK, when we were originally planning it, we actually had no idea about Brexit. But now for our second conference, we've still no idea about Brexit. No, I certainly don't. But there's been other changes in the last year, including the PSA Opel takeover and what that means for our industry. And we have to be ready for all kinds of change in the future for automotive supply chain and logistics. And we've heard about how much the automotive industry is going to change in the next 10 years. And some of these are really taking shape now. There's a huge shift in the move to electric vehicles. We even have car makers making vacuum cleaners. Or is it the other way around? I can never remember. Autonomous cars and trucks are now very close and within our grasp. So what do we, or what do you have to do differently? So as our conference theme reflects, the next stop is change. We all have to change. I recently asked some European car makers what they want from their LSPs in the future. Overwhelmingly, the answer was for them to be smarter and innovative. They didn't, the industry is no longer looking for tweaks and small steps. That's now an expectation. That's your basic job, is to do that. What they're looking for are game changers. And it's also obvious that the next wave of automotive logistics can't be done by one individual or one company working alone. We'll need the industry to work together to achieve that. And amongst the companies bringing solutions to your industry are our sponsors. Our gold sponsors, ABP, Evolution Time Critical, GBA, Kuehne + Nagel, and Priority Freight. Our global sponsors, Changzhou Logistics, CDC, and Jeffco, who are so called because they sponsor all of our conferences around the world. And our silver sponsors, Infor GT Nexus, Macroplastics, Proact, Royale International, VNet, and XPO Logistics. They've all got products, knowledge, and people who are ready to support your industry. So visit their stands, read their literature, and meet their people. Automotive Logistics UK is also part of the Automotive Logistics Live programme. This means that the conference is being streamed live across the world. But for those of you here in the room, it means that you can use this app to ask questions and to make comments to the whole audience. You can even send direct messages to other attendees. You can see on the screen there how to log on. The Wi-Fi will be under the Grove conference, and I think the password there is logistics. But please, log on to onto the live system, because it really helps you make the most of the conference experience. We'll be doing voting surveys later on, and those surveys often come up with surprising and interesting results. So be a part of the whole conference. But most importantly is what you do in the room. Our conferences are not lectures. They are interactive with questions and opinions in the sessions too. We'll also be using some iPads scattered around the venue to get your views on individual sessions and the conference as a whole. We'll not be using the paper evaluation forms this year, as we try and be forward-looking as well. So please use the iPads. As always, your opinions and comments are very, very important to us. We've got a great day ahead with some great forward-looking sessions. We've got an amazing dinner tonight, excuse me, in the world of magic and wizards. And I think sometimes you guys in logistics think that that's what the manufacturing and purchasing people expect you to be, trying to solve some of their problems. But please be ready for a great day. Be ready to learn, network, share ideas, and build contacts. And why not also have a little bit of fun? You'll see in front of you, or you're probably sitting on them now, some red and green cards on your tables. So these are going to be used for snap polls, just simple yes, no answers. So let's get started. Let's use the red and green cards now. So the first question is, do you already have a real contingency plan for Brexit? So green card if you do have a real plan for Brexit, or red card if not yet. So if you can raise your cards, please. Okay. So it seems like the majority of you are actually like the government, which is interesting to see. So I know this will be disappointing for you to hear, but enough from me. And onto the sessions. We've got 4 sessions. They'll all be in this main room, spread out on. This is a broad session looking forward at the whole industry. The second session will be looking at planning your supply chain journey. The third session will be on innovation, digitalization, and investment, or is it digitization? I still haven't worked out which word it is. I use digitalization when I'm playing Scrabble because it's got more letters and points. And a final roundup, Q&A at the end with some senior car makers who are here today to have a general discussion on how the industry is moving forward. But first, we're going to have an interesting look at how the industry is and how it's moving forward. We'll be looking at it from a forecast point of view, from an analyst, and we'll be looking at how the automotive industry in the UK is being encouraged to innovate. So for our first speaker of the day, I'd like to invite to the podium Martin Banneker, the Manager of Light Vehicle Sales Forecasting for IHS Markit. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So, hello everybody. Thank you for the invitation, that you gave me the opportunity to speak at this very interesting event. Normally, I'm more in contact with OEMs, suppliers, but today I think it's really interesting for me also to have some contact with logistic industry. So I'm located in Germany, so I'm more responsible for German-speaking markets, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and normally for the sales forecasting. But I think today for you it's more important to look at the production shifts, export flows, and so on. So that's why we today talk about light vehicle export and localization trends. First thing, we look on the agenda, or as a first introduction. So what do we expect for global light vehicle production? The good news is that we have still huge potential. So if we look at the different regions from a time frame from 2005 to 2025, so what do we expect? Where do we see growth on the production side? First thing, the mature markets, so Japan, Korea, Europe, and North America, with slight growth. Slight growth is 2.1 million units. So if you put all these cars side to side, it's a really huge number. But the growth is not so, not so big, of course, due to the fact that we have demographic change in Europe, in Japan, Korea, so no more people, we're getting less and older. So the growth, the main growth is coming from other regions, of course. Next one are the emerging markets, mainly here South Asia, with markets like India, for example, where we have still huge potential, and the market is doing some improvements, and we are quite optimistic that also production volumes will massively grow in that region. Not just India, but also in Thailand, for example, Malaysia, and one of these countries. And last but not least, China. So you see it in the headline, China is slowing, but still growing. In some cases, the government is, of course, try to avoid a bit to make the market overheating. So you have a lot of new brands and production facilities in the different provinces in China. So that's why production is not going with the same dynamic we saw in the last couple of years. But you see additionally 6.3 million units just from China. So this is really a huge number. So if we sum up all these numbers, we expect 17 million additional volumes, production volumes by 2025. What does it mean, or what is behind this number? 38% of this growth is coming from China. I think that's not a surprise, but it's really a huge number, and China is getting more and more important for the OEMs, for suppliers, and so on. I think that's not a secret, but it's a really big number here. Maybe what's interesting for you is that 88% of these additional volumes are produced locally. I think this is a trend which we saw, of course, in the last years, but this will increase. So OEMs will go to the end users. They have a lot of opportunities or advantages of these strategies, so they can kind of like balance the global demand a bit if they have production facilities all over the world. And they can make use of current exchanges. So that's why we see more and more localization trend in the car industry. And only 12% of these additional volumes are exports. So this changed a bit in the past, and the production or the localization trend will continue. So what does this mean for you or for the car industry? So production trends that affect automotive logistics. Of course, dynamic of changing export flow. So if we have a lot of localization, it's different than in the past. So you're really close to the production facilities as a supplier. So the shipping is not so far. So really short distances if you're really next to the markets. Through production localization. Then another important point is this modular platform strategy that we see at most OEMs. So this is really also a new trend, and this has, of course, some impacts to the logistic industry, but also suppliers, OEMs. So this is a really a big thing. So we will talk about that later. And of course, supply chain. What is with the supply chain? If we see new mobility trends like battery electric vehicles, what is different to the current situation? So if you have a battery in the car, is it dangerous to ship it overseas? So I haven't heard about Tesla, what they are doing, if it's more expensive to bring a battery electric vehicle to Europe or to North America. But these are really new topics which will pop up. And the supply chain industry or supply chain will definitely change because you have new players there. So you heard about a lot of joint ventures in the past. So traditional OEMs have joint venture with totally new players which are not from the automotive industry, like Google, Amazon, and other companies which play a big role here. So for example, Mini is planning, or BMW is planning to have these Amazon Echo in the car. So really a connection of different industries, and they are in most cases not talking in the same language, so it's very difficult to have joint ventures here. But this is what we expect in the future, and this will increase massively in the next months and years. So first thing, we look on the light vehicle export flows. I've prepared some regions. So first one, Europe. So the blue line is sales numbers in Europe. Green is local production, and the gray area is exports. And what we see in Europe is, of course, an increasing number of sales volumes, and also local production is increasing, and exports are increasing. Exports from Europe to other regions is mainly a premium thing. So we have the strong British OEMs, but also German ones, which are exporting their mainly premium vehicles. So you see the number, 41% of these exports are related to premium vehicles, and just 11% to mainstream manufacturers like Vauxhall or Ford, for example. And you see what will change, where are the volumes going to from compared 16 to 2025. And you see that nearly all regions will increase export volumes. That's our assumption for Europe. If we look at Japan, Korea, a little bit different picture. So as I mentioned at the beginning, demographic change in Japan, Korea, so they are getting less and older, so the car market is not dynamic anymore. So you see the blue line, it's kind of like moving sideways or declining a bit. Japan, Korea in the past are still very popular for its exports. So 50% of the production is made for exports. And what we see is, of course, production localization by Japanese OEMs, also in North America, in the European Union, due to this new trade agreement with the JEFTA, so Japan, Korea, or Japan and the Eurozone. This could be kind of like working as an accelerator for Japanese OEMs. But that's what we expect for Japan, Korea. North America, so you see the sales number, the blue line, really dynamic in the past, low oil price, so the US people buying pickups again, and also local production increasing. Exports doesn't play a big role in the US, so we have some Ford Mustangs, Corvettes here in Europe, but not really strong in exports from the US. What we see is, of course, an increasing ratio of exports, especially to the EU. So a lot of, or many OEMs are investing strongly in that region. If we talk about North America, it's more Mexico. So the German three, Audi, BMW, Mercedes, open plants there or will open plants there, so that we see larger number of exports from North America to Europe, but also to other regions. Like Mexico is kind of like working as an export hub then. This is for the OEMs, of course, a good strategy to really be not dependent on currencies and, I don't know, so better balance between the whole world. If you have a crisis somewhere in the world, you are not so dependent on one region, so you can shift production volumes. Especially when we talk about these modular platforms, it's easier for them to increase plant capacities in the US for a certain model. And with these new platforms, it's easy to switch programs to one plant to the other, for example. China, so far not very popular for exports. So I was on the Frankfurt Car Show 2 weeks ago. There are still some new products coming, and the announcements that they will come to Europe with new products. So far, most of these projects failed. But there are, of course, with European design, European engineers, there will be, of course, new vehicles coming to the market. And especially China, they have not so much loyalty or tradition, so they are more quick with new industries like electrification. For them, it's kind of like new. We are really, or we are used to have V8 engines in the former times. So for them, the dynamic is more quick, and the people can easily switch to new technologies because they are not so, from the history, not so strongly connected to, I don't know, gasoline engines, diesel engines. This could be an advantage for China if they have really an advantage in the electrification, for example. South Asia, popular more for, when we talk about India, for small vehicles, entry car vehicles. So the Indian people, they start from, I don't know, from motorcycle, and then if they increase in another income group, they can afford their first vehicle, and this is, in most cases, a small one, B segment car, A segment car, and India is then kind of like a hub for these smaller vehicles. Yeah, I think that's, and Thailand, South Asia, more famous for pickups. So this is a hub for developing pickups from Thailand to all places all over the world. Production localization, so we see the plant capacity expansion. I think you see the green line is Europe, Japan, Korea all together, so above 40 million units, and it's kind of like sideways movement, small incremental volumes. On the other side, the red line, China, other dynamics are really strong, and this year we expect that the plant capacities which are in China surpassing those of Europe and Japan, Korea. What does that mean? Europe, Japan, Korea, of course, still some incremental volume. If you look at Europe, we have some additional plant capacities in Russia, for example, where we had, of course, a big crisis with the Crimea crisis, oil prices low, and we see the strong investments the OEMs made in the past in that region. With having less sanctions to Russia, we see the market, the first signals that the market is going up again in Russia, and there will be, of course, some new production capacities which are growing and growing in the next couple of months, years, if there's no other or new crisis in that country. On the right side, we see what are the German free premiums OEM doing in the US or in North America. So the green area is imports. This was always quite strong, so those vehicles are quite popular in North America and the US. And what they are now doing is they add local production content in North America, in Mexico, of course, to serve clients in North America, so Mexico as a hub, but also to bring those vehicles to Europe. So we have Audi Q5, for example, coming from the US or from Mexico, and also other, mainly SUVs, then coming to Europe and other places in the world. And this is, of course, an advantage for the OEMs to outbalance their risk, so they are not so dependent on currency risks and so on. Modular platforms, so I mentioned it at the beginning, also a hot topic. I prepared some examples from the past, so 2005, VW with the PQ35 platform, and with this platform they had an average platform volume of 1.52 million units, and this really changed over the last years, and that will have a stronger impact going forward. So these platforms, so we expect that from 16 to 25, the number of platforms will decrease by 23%, but on the other side, the numbers of programs will increase by 39%. So we see less platforms, but with one platform we see much more volumes per platform. This is, of course, good for the OEMs, so they can save costs, for example. And what we see with the programs is that we have that the OEMs are really covering every niche. So if you look at Jaguar, Land Rover, or Audi, you have Audi Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. So, and a lot of new programs coming. So every niche is really covered. And it's easy with the platforms to have different vehicles on one platform. So you're not really limited by the size or the engine. So this is really a freedom to really have a large number of vehicles, also different vehicles on one platform. So next slide we have some, what are the opportunities of these modular platforms and what are the threats? Of course, increases commonality of parts. It's, of course, a cost reduction for the OEMs if they are really similar. Can make a lot of vehicles on one platform. Increases production flexibility. So in the past, you had a plant just for SUVs or for larger vehicles, and now you're really flexible to shift production programs between the different plants. So you can produce the Golf, VW Golf in the US, in Germany, in Slovakia, so you're quite flexible with these modular platforms. And you can offer, of course, the different types of powertrain, so for electrification, hybrids, diesel, gasoline, gas vehicles. Yeah, that's possible. And of course, accelerated development times, so you just don't have to really build up a program for a certain platform. In the past, we had really platforms for vans, for SUVs, for smaller vehicles, for larger vehicles, and this complexity is now gone. So it's really easy to bring out new programs with those platforms. And of course, reduce purchasing costs. On the other side, threats, of course, especially recalls. I think we had a lot of big news here in the past, that there was really huge recalls coming, and if you have modular platforms and you have one supplier for, I don't know, one small part, then the number of recall or for one vehicle is then extremely high, and of course a high risk if you have a similar product with similar parts in it. And of course threat of production reallocation between the plants, so if the OEM is not happy with the government in that country, or the costs are too high, then easily can shift to other regions. And of course, limits individualization. If you have one platform, you have of course, some flexibility. But if you look at the current models you see in the market, they are nearly, especially when you look at Volkswagen Group, you have a lot of new SUVs, but they have really small differences. So if you look at the Tiguan and all the other products which are launched in the past from Seat, from Skoda, they are really similar. And also for the premium area where you have Bentley, Porsche, and all that, they're really similar just from the outside. It's different, but from the engine and the parts, they are really similar. Then, of course, a big topic, battery electric vehicle trends. I think that's the topic we can talk about 1 hour. So today we have just 20 minutes to talk about it. So you see on the left side what we expect global growth of battery electric vehicles. So we are coming, of course, from a really, really low level, and we expect a massive change going forward. So nearly all OEMs have announced products will come in the next, I would say, 24 months. They will start really to have some products available, and then, of course, the future we will see if this really will be successful. But what we see, and that the OEMs really changed their strategy, so there is no alternative. They are really now focusing on electrification, hybrids, of course. And this is, of course, totally changing the supplier chain. So in the past, you have an OEM, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. But what is now with the battery electric supply chain? You have some information provider, you have a cloud, connected car, autonomous driving. So this is really changing the landscape which we have at the moment. At the bottom you see some numbers from Volkswagen. So they said quicker R&D, less than 40% or minus 40% of platforms due to this battery electric trend or new mobility. Propulsion system will be reduced. I think you can also see that at the moment that they have really a standard engine, and then they can make a lot of different variants out of this. And of course, 30% to 60% less successors. So in the past we had the VW Golf, and the next generation, and now with these flexibility, it's not that we have really maintained some programs. So if we say it's maintain those programs. And of course, less component variants. If we have a battery platform, so it's the number of parts is of course much less than that we have at the moment. So finally, trends that affect automotive logistics, kind of like a summary dynamics of changing export flows. So suppliers, logistic companies will be forced to be more flexible as market demand is changing more dynamically. And exports are the first step of a future potential reallocation. So if you track export trends for suppliers and logistic companies, it's essential to be prepared for next step. Strategy, product localization or production localization. This will be a further trend. And of course the modular platforms, which will also really change the landscape we have at the moment. with larger numbers on one platform, and of course, a new flexibility to move plant capacities through the plants and change programs in different plant facilities. And of course, supply chain of battery electric vehicles. This will be a really complete game changer, and we will see some new joint ventures coming and new players which are not in the automotive industry so far. Will be important in new programs in the development of those vehicles. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, giving us a good view on how the automotive industry is going to be changing in the next few years. Just a couple of things. I accidentally said at the beginning that the host of the, I gave the wrong name for the host of the cocktail reception last night. It was actually hosted by ABP, but it's their own fault that I got it wrong by serving those ginger mule drinks last night. And clearly our banner also had a couple of drinks last night as well. We know how you feel. Yeah. Next up, to hear what's happening in the UK regarding innovation and what we're doing to try and support the automotive industry. I'd like to welcome to the podium David Tozer, the IDP Program Manager from Automotive Innovate UK. Thank you, David.
Hopefully no sign-related issues in my presentation, but welcome. Good morning to you all. As rightly introduced, my name is David Tozer. I'm a Programme Manager with Innovate UK. What I want to do is spend the next 15, 20 minutes talking about some of the funding opportunities that we've made available in 2017 and looking forward to 2018 and the opportunities which are of course available and open to most of you, if not all of you, within the room today. I am available throughout the day if you do have follow-up questions, and if there's any sensitive project ideas that you want to discuss with me, I'll be happy to go through that with you. Before I get into the kind of meat of the project, just a little bit about Innovate UK, for those of you who aren't aware. We are the UK's innovation agency, primarily funded by BEIS, as well as other government departments. Our aim is simple, to drive growth. And that's driving growth within the UK. And we do that by enabling, de-risking, and supporting innovation across our 4 key or focus areas, which includes enabling and emerging technologies, health and life sciences, infrastructure systems, and for where the automotive team sits, materials and manufacturing. We sit in a very unique position. We work very closely with government, academia, and of course business to make sure that our competitions are strategically aligned to deliver the most impact for the UK. We believe that we're very good at it. Since 2007, we've positioned in excess of £1.8 billion across our competitions, and that's helped support over 8,000 organisations. Now, the projects that those organisations have developed have subsequently delivered £11.7 billion worth of growth to the UK economy, while delivering an additional 60,000 jobs. And we fully expect that trend will continue and grow well into the future. We're lucky in the UK to have an extraordinary platform for innovation and for innovation to thrive, which is often the envy of a lot of other countries across the globe. Right from the early stage, we're able to support ideas through the research councils. This often involves a lot of the academics, but also the supply chain. That's lab scale and bench scale projects, which can help understand what the potential of those projects might be. When they've done that, they're then able to come to Innovate UK. And this is around the sort of 3 to 6 level in terms of technology readiness levels. And we help to develop the proof of concept behind those projects and those technologies. It's very much about demonstrating that application on a vehicle in the environment to which it is intended to be used once fully commercialed. Post that, the Advanced Propulsion Centre take over, They will then work with you and your consortium, which often include the Tier 1, Tier 2, and the OEMs, to get it to market. And that's what they're all about. And they work tirelessly to make that happen. We've had a very busy year in 2017, and along with the APC, the Advanced Propulsion Centre, we've been lucky enough to put competitions out in excess of £250 million, and that covers a big raft of different areas across automotive, from low emission freight trials, £20 million competition, to connected and autonomous vehicles, an absolutely huge growth area with a lot of interest within the UK to make the UK leader in this space. Vehicle to grid, I'll come on to that shortly, and Faraday, all around battery technology, again making the UK a global leader in the development of battery technologies. Niche vehicle market, often the area to which more innovation can happen because the price points allow it. So it's all the vehicles that generally I cannot afford. And then low carbon vehicles, IDP, and this is the area that I look after, the transition towards zero emission vehicles. And I'll cover some more of these now. So with low carbon vehicles, there are two dates which stick in my mind. 2040, the sale of diesel and petrol cars and vans will stop. And for 2050, all cars and vans to be zero emission. And that, for us, is a once-in-a-generation change within the sector. And there are policy drivers which are very much supporting this. From an investment standpoint, the UK, I believe, in 2016 produced around about 1.73 million cars, which was an increase of 8% on the previous year. But the supply chain which supports that within the UK is huge and absolutely critical to the future success of the UK. And as such, zero emission or low carbon vehicles have the opportunity to maintain that position, but also grow it into the future. From a carbon standpoint, absolutely we have obligations with regards to reducing carbon, and low emission vehicles can help us to achieve that. Air quality, very much a hot topic in 2017. We're all aware of the issues around NOx and how that has an implication for the health benefits of everyone within the UK. But also with that comes the associated environmental and economic problems around air quality. So again, transition to low emission vehicles can absolutely address that. Lastly, energy security. The energy market of tomorrow will definitely not look like what we have today or for the last 20 years. It needs to be more intelligent, it needs to be more flexible, and it needs to work very closely with low emission electrified vehicles to make it a success. So how at Innovate UK are we delivering innovation within this particular area of low carbon vehicles and with the likes of the automotive logistics sector? It's IDP, the Integrated Delivery Programme, one of the longest programmes we've been running at Innovate UK. It's now, as the name suggests, on its 14th iteration, and I'm very happy to say that this competition was launched a couple of weeks ago with a closing date of the 13th of December. It's a £20 million competition open to feasibility studies and collaborative R&D, and we are looking for technologies which help us transition towards zero emission vehicles. Now those vehicles encompass everything from motorbikes, so you might be operating a motorbike courier service, it might be pickup trucks or vans, again very much associated with logistics, but of course your passenger vehicles. We're also very pleased to say that this year there is a specific ask for projects that will help the HGV sector, so anything over and above 7.5 tonnes, to start to transition towards zero emission vehicles. Now we're not suggesting in the near future that there'll be 44-tonne electric, purely electric HGVs roaming up and down the M1. That's not reality, but we can do things now which can help that transition. So in 15, 20, 25 years' time, we might be in a position to say that we've absolutely achieved that. The areas to which we're looking for technical innovation cover everything from lightweighting, aerodynamic improvements to HGVs, helping to reduce emissions, powertrain structures, energy storage, and electric machines and power electronics. So quite a cross-section. And some of you in the room will have been involved in IDP, and we believe it is definitely one of the most successful programs of work that we run at Innovate. A lot of interest in it, We expect a lot of applications. If you want more information, do please come and talk to me, because you in the room are exactly the type of people that we want to be part of consortiums which bid in for Innovate and IDP funding. The Faraday Challenge, I just want to touch on this briefly because it is very important in regard to our transition to zero-emission vehicles. The industrial strategy set out earlier this year, or potentially last year, very much wants the UK to become a global leader in battery technology. And as such, the UK government is putting £246 million into making that a reality. That includes both new facilities from an academic standpoint, but also an £80 million scale-up facility for the development of battery technologies and the supply chain within the UK. In terms of Innovate UK, we're also running a £40 million competition, the first of its kind under Faraday, to look for innovation across the development of batteries within their life cycle. So that's from raw materials right through to end of life in order to make them definitely more circular. And all of that information will then help feed into our other programs around low emission vehicles or low emission freight or whatever it might be in that space. Next, to come on importantly to vehicle to grid. We talk a lot about how the vehicles are changing, how they're becoming more dynamic, how they're becoming more innovative in terms of their transition to electrification. But it's very important to note that they need to operate within an infrastructure that can deal with those vehicles and deal with them on scale, which is why we are starting to make inroads in bringing the energy sector and the automotive sector very much closer together. And inherently, they are not the same. They are quite distinct, and they haven't worked together in any great form that we're aware of in the past. They have different investment cycles. They are driven by different priorities, and of course, they are regulated in different ways. But if you look at the impact to which electric vehicles, if they do take off to the degree that we hope, they will have a huge implication for the grid. There are around about 110,000 EVs on the road in the UK today, and I think that's a leading position in terms of the number of vehicles across Europe, but it only represents around about 0.02% of the UK's grid capacity. Once we're up to 15 million vehicles, that's everything from commercial vehicles right through to what I would drive in the future, that's an 11%. That 11% getting home at 5:30 in the afternoon, plugging in and charging at home is going to be a huge demand on the grid, and probably not one that's capable of actually delivering the customer and consumer needs. So as such, we are bringing the two together, and we're doing this again through another competition. It's £20 million. It closes in a couple of weeks, so you may actually not have enough time to actually become part of a consortium if you're not already. But what I would say is there's been a huge amount of interest in this competition. And when that happens, it's highly likely that next year we'll want to run something in a very similar vein to keep on making the progress that we all need to achieve. For vehicle to grid this year, absolutely it includes fleet. We want people across the commercial landscape who are operating fleets in whatever size to start to help us innovate in this area. That could be anything around the business models that they're operating, the way in which on and off vehicle hardware works with the infrastructure and with what's on the vehicle, and the trials of different products and services, which we know are going to start to become even more relevant than they are today. But also user acceptance and consumer engagement. Absolutely, we need more of this. For the barriers which people innately have with regards to change, we want to overcome them. But we can only do that by demonstrating the potential of this technology and demonstrating within a commercial environment especially. So I implore you to keep an eye on the developments within this. There will be some very interesting things coming through. And if you are looking at the transition towards more electrification as a business, then absolutely this type of competition can help you demonstrate that, can help you trial it, to de-risk it for your organisation, and then, of course, others within the UK. One of the last areas I want to touch on is connected and autonomous vehicles, or CAV. Along with batteries, this is seen as an absolute priority area for government and subsequently Innovate UK. Now, there's a reason for the need to develop this within the UK, not just because it's an opportunity for UK PLC, but also from a safety standpoint. Around about 1,800 people are killed on our roads every year, a lot of that down to human error. Connected and autonomous vehicles have an opportunity to reduce that significantly in the longer term. From a mobility standpoint, yes, we have an aging population. To give that population, or that side of the population, the freedom that we often take for granted every day, absolutely benefits the economy, benefits from a social standpoint. Efficiency-wise, no one likes being stuck in traffic jam. It's not a good use of the vehicle, it's not a good use of our time, and it's not good in terms of the environmental impacts. And from productivity, if I spend 6 hours a day stuck in my car, I'm not working, that's not good from Innovate standpoint. If we can address that by having a mobility solution that enables me to work while I'm traveling, to continue to work, absolutely. And we're lucky in the UK to be putting a lot of effort into this, to make the UK a vibrant world leader in the testing and development of CAV. And as such, the government is putting significant sums of money into this. From a testing standpoint, you have the Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicle, which is a government department. They are creating testing zones or testing areas within the UK so people can go and plug and play. They can drop their technologies in. They can work with the logistics companies. They can work with the OEMs, the suppliers and users of these types of vehicles to understand them in a normal operating environment. We're also a country where CAV can be deployed actually quite readily within our UK roads. We don't need to go through lengthy permits or other restrictive barriers. You can basically, in one of the testing environments, go and actually start to operate a CAV vehicle. And where Innovate UK comes in, from a research standpoint, absolutely around real-world solutions. We have a long history of developing CAV projects. We're now on our CAV 3 competition. There is a huge amount of interest from a cross-section of industries and organisations, which I'll show you shortly. And importantly, we're also very much in need of a CAV industry that is safe and secure by design, not just for consumers, but also for the businesses from a B2B standpoint. That's taking into consideration cybersecurity, and the UK has put in policies and guidance notes around this to help make that a reality. So for Innovate UK, there's another competition. This is a £25 million competition, very much looking for the technical solutions to solve CAV challenges that provide real-world benefits to users. It is still open, but again, it closes this month. As I've already said, there is a huge amount of interest here. We will definitely be running CAV competitions, 1 or 2 of them next year, in a very similar vein. And we're progressing towards full autonomy. That's right up the SAE levels. Obviously not within the next or near future, but longer term, definitely. And for things like HGVs, we're starting to see the transition towards this type of technology, and of course commercial vehicles as well. And I just included the CAV testbed, really to create, again, the world's most vibrant ecosystem for the development and trialling of these types of vehicles. And in recognition of the interest, here's some of the organisations involved in the CAV1 collaborative R&D stream. You'll see that there, yes, absolutely, there's some traditional automotive OEMs in there, but there are also companies of a huge range of backgrounds, and with it comes their interest in this particular. This is from SMEs right up to the global multinationals. And the diversity here is increasing exponentially every time we release a new CAV. That's from the gaming world, that's from the traditional world, and that's from the likes of other organisations across the globe with an interest or a vested interest in the development of connected and autonomous vehicles. A penultimate slide for me, one which is very much around freight. In 2016, we launched our low emission freight trials, very much to overcome the 31% contribution that freight has to on-road emissions within the UK. and to help develop strategically the transition towards zero emission or lower emission vehicles. And that's across everything from freight, logistics, utilities, and of course, emergency industries. Now, the range of technologies, and this is all publicly available information, is stark. Everything from hydrogen, electrification, we're looking at zero carbon fuels, and the business models which a lot of the day-to-day freight operators will be utilizing. And the range of partners, again, is a diverse one. Universities, you've got big retailers in there, such as John Lewis and Ocado, and of course, also very pleasing to see the likes of the Yorkshire Ambulance Service, London Fire Brigade, because again, they have requirements on the vehicles that they run to get them in line with Euro 456. So they need, and are, what's really pleasing from our perspective, taking and making efforts to understanding the types of vehicles that they'll be choosing for the future. Again, this has been very successful, so we do hope that there's another competition in this space early part of next year. So again, keep track of everything that we're doing at Innovate UK, because there are opportunities there. But we do need you. We need the brightest and the best to put forward competition ideas to really test us in what's possible within the UK. Because absolutely we believe that we're in a state of change at the moment, and one which is going to actually benefit both the UK PLC, society, and the environment. And we're very much looking forward to it. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour for what Innovate UK is all about and some of the opportunities that we have. But please come and talk to us if you think there's an opportunity that we haven't fully grasped yet. Because although we are somewhat directed by government, we're absolutely industry-led. And that's very important for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we're on to the kind of panel discussion and the Q&A. And despite looking very young, I'm going to be doing it from sitting here for a variety of reasons. But before we start, there was a lot of talk about electric vehicles. So again, if we can use the red and green cards, the first question is if you actually own an electric vehicle. So if you do green for yes, red for no. So who actually owns an electric vehicle? Okay. What about hybrid? Does that change if you ask about hybrid cars? Barely. And then is anyone kind of looking forward to owning an electric car or a hybrid car? Okay. Okay, just checking that, because in case you couldn't see, because obviously I can see from the front, there was a few for who own them, a few for who own hybrid cars, but there was a majority who would look forward to owning a car, because I wonder just how many people don't even want an electric vehicle. They like the fun, the buzz of owning like the gas-powered, whatever you would call it, petrol-powered or diesel-powered. And then one final one for now is autonomous cars. Is anyone looking forward to driving or whatever you do with an autonomous car? Okay, so that's again the majority, but maybe a slightly smaller majority. So although obviously this is where you get involved in the session, I would like to ask the two panelists first about how they think what's holding up or what will speed up the introduction of autonomous cars. And firstly to you, maybe as you do your projections, how do you project the growth of autonomous cars, and what do you see holding it back? Do you think, is it going to be regulation and insurance issues that are going to be holding it up? Is it going to be the technology that the car makers, although we're talking about perhaps particular autonomous vehicles, but even electric vehicles, is that still too slow? Do we need longer ranges? Or is it the customer's choice that you think might limit the desire to, or the growth of production and sales of of electric and autonomous vehicles. So firstly to you, and then I'll ask.
I think it's a mixture of customer needs or what customers expect from autonomous driving. So I think they are still afraid, especially when we talk about full autonomous driving. So we have different steps from, I don't know, lane assist or driving in a traffic jam, that the car is doing it automatically. And of course, a big role is, of course, the different regulations in the countries. When you have in the US, in some states, it's really open, very liberal. But in other regions in the world, you have a lot of safety risks and insurance risks. So this will definitely de-accelerate the market of autonomous driving. But what we will see is, as a first step, especially in areas with high population, that we have these, I don't know, traffic autonomous driving, so that it's accelerating and braking automatically, so you can put your hands off the steering wheel, but this will be the first step. But the first real growth of those kind of vehicles, I think we will talk about 2030, 2035, where we have really kind of like robot taxis or something that it can bring you to the work, to the office. But yeah, this is really future. But the systems are available. I think the technique is all right, but there are a lot of still some details which have to be solved.
And David?
For me, there are technical challenges very much to overcome, both from a software standpoint and from an engineering standpoint. There's a lot of activity in this area, so it will happen eventually, but to get to that position where we've got full autonomy, so you sit in a vehicle, tell it where to go, and it starts interacting with you from there on out, is not easy. And there are different parts of the industry that often haven't worked together that need to start working together to make this a reality. I do believe they are starting to appreciate the need for it to be very consumer or customer centric. It is all around the customer, and if those types of pods or whatever they are very human centric and they're developed with the human in mind, then we will overcome some of the more personal challenges that each of us have with regards to getting into a machine that can do 100 miles an hour and just letting it get on with it with no control from ourselves. But they're all technical solutions for these challenges, so absolutely we will get there.
Yeah. And what needs to come first, or are they going at the same rate? Smart cities or smart cars, or electric autonomous cars? Are they going at the same pace? Are they ready to work with each other?
From my perspective, they are. Obviously, there's a lot of activity in both areas, but there is a need for them to work together because ultimately, a connected vehicle will need to be one which is driven probably by a different propulsion system or a way in which it can be charged that's differently to now. So the development of the two in parallel absolutely needs to happen. That's from both an energy standpoint, on-road charging, or drop-off charging. Again, it needs to happen, but their infrastructure changes. It's often it's more of a challenge to change the infrastructure of a city than it is to change a vehicle. So there are difficulties with that.
And you're working on both sides?
Very much so.
Anything to add to that, Martin?
I think infrastructure is the main thing here, and it's really also up to the local governments to do some incentives or to really invest in those kind of infrastructure, because without these, it's really difficult to satisfy all the customers. So we heard in Norway, the first mover in electrification. I think the government said now, please do not buy electric vehicle because overnight everybody is charging their electric vehicle, and it's really a problem with the energy system of some cities, Oslo, for example. So so we need the same speed for vehicles to develop, but also the infrastructure and what is happening in the cities to give the infrastructure.
Okay. And of course, it is, this is the Q&A or comment part of the conference. So if you've got any questions, any comments, anything that really disagrees with the speakers would be great fun. And if you do, and you can also use the app, whatever it's called, the live streaming, to post a question that I can probably see, although I now realize I need better glasses. But otherwise, raise your hand. Wait for the microphone to come, say your name and your company name so that we can all hear you and it can be heard on the live stream as well. I think we've got one from the...
Chris Ludwig, Automotive Logistics. Question for Martin. You managed to avoid the B word, as we referred to it last night, and then thanks to Spain, I think we also have the C word. We might start using a little bit as well. Okay, obviously we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but if we go on what the government of the day is sort of planning with a 2019 exit and a perhaps 2 or 3 year transition period, where do you see UK vehicle production heading sort of post that, in a really post-hard Brexit, or whatever you want to call it, scenario? And I know it's quite short term and perhaps a bit unfair to ask, but we did have a general strike in Catalonia yesterday, and obviously there's some key automotive plants in the region. Do you see impacts from this disturbance in Spain kind of having short-term and medium-term impacts on the auto industry?
And just to clarify, the C word is Catalan, in case there's any confusion. Yeah.
Okay, the first question regarding the UK and the referendum. I think I think at the beginning, if we heard this event or what happened, I think there was a lot of threats and everybody was really shocked. I think the currency, everything is really dynamic. But now with the time, I think we saw that the OEMs have invested a lot in the UK. For example, BMW in new plants and new technology centers, and I think they confirmed some programs also in 19 and beyond that. So I think they are quite optimistic that they will find some solution. And if we see the power of the automotive industry, especially for the German industry or German OEMs, for example, they are really dependent on the UK market to sell their vehicles here and to produce here. So I think they will have enough power and negotiation skills to make some deals between the UK and Germany or the EU in general to really maintain the situation, or that is not really a break in production or something. But on the other side, of course, we have some, as I mentioned, some product localization. So they have options, of course, to shift volumes for the Mini, for example, to the Netherlands very quickly. So they have some power in the backhand to really have some pressure on the UK government to say, okay, if you are not doing this and this, we can decrease volumes in the UK, for example. And in terms of the Spanish one, I think it's really hot news. So I haven't changed my forecast since last week. I think we heard these rumors or what is going on in Spain is now for a long time, but it's at the moment not really sure what will happen and what will be the impacts on the Spanish industry. I think Spain really was quite successful in the last 2 years, coming really from a really high unemployment rate and really big problems, but they made a turnaround, and they are quite, not just the car market, but in general the economy is quite good, and this will be, I think, bad news if there's really a big break in the country. So they have to be careful. That's my opinion.
And David, has your strategy changed, or your Innovate UK, because of Brexit? Was there something that came down from above that said we now need to do things differently for this reason?
Only in a positive way, I suppose. The amount of money going to research or innovation has actually greatly increased since the announcement of Brexit, which is fantastic for us. It means that we can position more money with organisations and various different competitions. With regards to Brexit specifically, I don't think the day-to-day at Innovate has changed at all from what it was prior to the referendum. And if you're looking at some of the more European funding opportunities, then they're still open to UK businesses. You can apply for Horizon 2020 grants. That's not changing in the near future. And we will still work with organisations from outside of the UK, provided the work is done within the UK. And again, we cannot see that changing because sometimes we don't have the skills and capability within the UK, and we do need to go further afield. But it's positive at the moment.
Okay, any questions from the audience? One at the back there.
Hi, Tarek Rafani from MJ Solpac. A few years ago at an auto logistics conference in Bonn, we had a great talk from Chris Spangle, the designer who was at BMW. And he was talking about the rise of autonomous vehicles. And since that time, we've had the growth of Uber, and we've got a younger generation who are less keen to buy cars. We've also got a situation where there's a younger generation who are very used to sharing things online. They don't necessarily own things, they rent time on things. And do you think a combination of autonomous vehicles and that change in patterns and mindset of the younger generation will result in a massive reduction in car ownership, and there'll be some form of car sharing, which will presumably result in a massive reduction in number of cars produced? I mean, Chris in his talk, if you remember, said that you imagine what you could do with all those city centre car parks and turn them into living space, because autonomous vehicles wouldn't need to be parked there. So that change between cities and people and autonomous vehicles, does that mean that the motor industry in the future is going to be massively smaller? If you can have something massively smaller.
Yeah. And it's not just the young generation, it's people even in their mid-30s like myself. Because I recently changed our cars at home, and we've kind of come down to one. My wife's kind of got the family car, and I don't have my own car at all. I use the trains and the tube to get to work in London, and as much as I can elsewhere. And if I need to use a car, sometimes I'm more likely to use Uber or something like that, so I don't miss having a car. So it's something that is happening now, definitely in my household anyway.
Okay. I think it depends really in which age you are. So in the beginning, if you are really young and in cities and are studying, I think you do not have the interest to buy a car. And we have a lot of studies. One say, of course, people, they like to share a vehicle, so they are not so interested in own a vehicle, but other studies say people, if they have the money and the option, they still like vehicles and they want their own vehicle. And what we see, of course, this is a phenomenon especially for large cities where it's really crowded. Okay, there it doesn't make sense to have own vehicles. But if you're then getting older, have babies, for example, you go out in the rural areas, so you need a car. You cannot say, okay, I go do it by public transport. In some countries we have very good public transport, for example, but in the US, for example, and in Germany in parts, it's really critical to do the same, I don't know, ways by public transport. So I think reduction in numbers of cars. On the other side, you can say autonomous driving in the first first step could increase also vehicle sales, because you need a lot of additional vehicles. So it's likely that people have their own vehicles still in the garage, but for some special ways they use, I would say, the way of transport which is most comfortable for them. So it's a mixture. So you're going by car to a park and ride place, then you go by train, then you use car sharing or autonomous driving, something. So this is what we will see in the future. So it's a mixture of old but also new technologies. So that's David.
I believe that the rise of product service systems and alternative business models will absolutely continue, and that will have an effect on car ownership. People will move to a position where they may not own a car, especially if they live in an urban environment. But for myself, I grew up in Cornwall. To have an autonomous vehicle in Cornwall, I think presents a different set of challenges. And for me, ownership was the only way forward. And whether or not that will change in the near term is probably quite a challenging thing. So there will be winners and losers, of course, but there are also opportunities with regards to the rise in CAV.
And again, using my personal experience, as someone who's in his early 40s, does that work? You don't even believe that one. Although I haven't got that second car and I use the trains and Uber and so on, I think if there was if I could get an autonomous vehicle, then I probably would, because that would take away the head. One of the reasons I'm fed up of driving is the traffic and the parking, things like that. So maybe from at the moment I've cut back on the number of cars we have in our house. But maybe if there was autonomous cars, it would actually go up again. And maybe, my father would have had one or something like that, whereas at whatever it was, 75, we took the keys away from him, or whatever. So So just another thought on that. Any more questions? Well, there's one here first, one in the middle. It's right, the microphone's coming.
And I can talk loud.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, quick one for David. I know it's silly season with the party conferences going on, but last week there was mention of robot taxis in terms of replacing people with AGVs or machines and the rest of it. Does that affect on where you're going?
Can I just ask the name and company name if you don't mind?
Daniel Land Rover.
Yeah, thanks.
As I said in the presentation, we are in some ways directed by industry. So if there is a new direction of travel which seems to be taking precedent, then absolutely we will look to invest in that area. But predominantly we are we are technology agnostic. So we do not back any particular technology over another. It's for you as an industry to demonstrate to us and to the UK government and beyond which is the best available technology and the route to go from there on out.
By the way, I was pleased to see our company up there in several of your boxes. I've got one other question. If two of the autonomous vehicles crash, whose insurance pays out?
I'm afraid I'm not able to answer that.
Question at the back there, please.
Hi, Christine Calver from Automotive Logistics as well. It's just a quick question. If there is going to be a forecast, you said, of 11% drain on the electric grids, what work is being done with the electric companies for them to be able to be ready for 2040? Because there's a Hinkley Point's being put back, the nuclear. There's a lot of question marks around the capacity of this country to provide enough energy at the moment, and very much dependent on the next election as well. There's a government in waiting, as they're calling themselves, who are talking about nationalising quite a lot of these industries. So what impact will that have? It's a two-tier question there. But
Okay. So I don't sit in the energy team, so I'm going to give you more so my personal opinion. I think we will see a big diversification of the energy sector, or that trend to continue. We know that renewables are reducing in price quite considerably. I think offshore wind is now price comparative or actually cheaper than nuclear. And there is a huge resource offshore for that to take place. But with grid and with vehicle integration, we want to be in a position where, yes, vehicles can take away power from the grid, but also at peaks of low demand where vehicles have the capability, they can feed back into the grid to try and balance out the peaks and troughs that we know are going to be apparent in the future. In regard to your second question, it's very difficult for me to answer around future policy or policy decisions or decisions around the nationalisation of energy. I'm afraid until it happens, I can't answer that question. I'm sorry.
A question I was recently asked was, and it was something that came up quite a few years ago at one of our conferences, about moving to electric vehicles and why it was necessary, is because transportation is the second highest user of carbons and so on. And I asked what was number one, and they said power. So I said, so what's the value of moving anything from to electric vehicles? And I was asked that question last week. And I can't remember the answer, but Elon Musk did a TED talk in 2013 answering that actual question, why it was use less resources if you had an electric vehicle. He used lots of long words, which is why I won't give you the answer now. But it's worth looking at if you're wondering about how is using electric vehicles actually going to make be efficient compared to the other ways that we use power. Any other questions? Right, one more question from my side really is who will be the game changers in the industry? Perhaps particularly for David, is the people you're working with have the car makers perhaps only really started changing after Tesla and the threat of Google cars and Apple cars and now Dyson cars? Would Uber have worked if they'd actually gone to the black cab industry and said, I've got a great idea for an app? Would Airbnb have really worked if they'd gone to Marriott and said, I've got a great idea? So are you seeing exciting new game changers coming through? And the exciting new ideas, are you seeing an equal number or equal new ideas from the car makers, the vehicle makers, or are you seeing the best ideas coming from outside of the logistics or transportation industry?
So probably this year and across all the competitions that we've run, we've probably had around about 2,500, 3,000 applications for funding, and that's from project consortiums. So you're probably talking about 10,000 different companies trying to actually get hold of some Innovate UK money. And those companies will range from startups to SMEs and right through to obviously the larger tier one and the OEMs. So I don't believe there is one part of the supply chain or one size of organisation that is at the leading edge, because they all make a contribution to what we're trying to achieve, and they will do that with the skills and capabilities that they have. So that will definitely continue, and we want to be able to grow the SMEs who have unique ideas often that can then be taken up by some of the more established and traditional organisations, while growing those SMEs in terms of the revenue that they make, and also in terms of the jobs that they can provide. What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
No, that really was the question, is who's coming through. And I suppose one more point on that is how good are logistics companies coming forward and claiming the kind of, the money's out there, that's out there. We often hear, the EU is often giving out grants for things. We're not great at knowing it or getting involved or claiming it. So, I mean, you said you need us, but we could definitely do with your support as well. So, do you see actively like logistics companies coming towards you? Well, I can leave it there, and then what they should do if they are interested.
Yes, very much so. In some of the low emission freight trials especially, we have the likes of UPS and TNT. So they will definitely be involved in a number of our competitions going forward. But we're ready to obviously expand on that. Again, we will look at any project involving any type of organisation. But the often difficult thing that they find is that they have trouble connecting with the right organisations who have the capabilities that they want to get hold of and utilise. One way to do that is obviously to keep an eye on Innovate UK, but also go through our knowledge transfer partnership partners, who are basically our networking partners. And they will connect different organisations with other organisations who have similar ideas or want to achieve similar things. And they create an ecosystem that can connect people, and they're very, very effective. So if you do have an idea or you do want to try something, then absolutely there's a competition for you, and there will be partners for you as well. But it's finding them is sometimes the hardest thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, one more question from the guy with the hairy face.
The question I'm going to ask came in via the app, just okay. You might not have spotted it, and I'll kind of broaden it slightly. The question is actually whether Dyson can be a viable player in the future, but maybe we can broaden that to say other disruptors. Obviously with the EVs, it's a completely different product. It is opportunity for new players to come in. So this is for you, Martin, but also where do you see new players coming into the scope and potentially outgunning some of the traditional players?
Yeah, of course, the vacuum cleaner is really, really latest news. But I think we just can look on the logistic industry. In Germany, we have the DHL, Deutsche Post. They started, so they cannot find an electric vehicle for their needs, so they produce it themselves. And they are quite successful, so what we heard. So they're increasing their plant capacities, and they are really buying the vehicle which they need for their needs, so really for the last miles to the customers. So this is I think one type of players, so from different industry, logistics. And I think we will see some, like Google Car, for example. I think they are not really interested to produce their own vehicles, but they want to show what they can, and then they have joint ventures with other partners so that everybody can use its strength. So we're more from the software side. A company is more successful, and on the other side, the traditional car makers, they know a lot of the customers and what they need, and they have the dealer network and so on. So I think it needs both. But we will see definitely new players coming. If they're really then bringing their own vehicle, or if it's then really with a traditional OEM, so as a joint venture or something. Yeah, I think that's what we see in the future more and more.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so before we close, just a couple of points. Firstly, someone asked me why I mentioned the WAGs earlier, the wives and girlfriends of the footballers. In case you haven't seen the survey, there was actually a survey that said that although they're all married to multimillionaires, their dream partners were people actually in the automotive logistics industry. Maybe it was just me. But otherwise, I'd like to thank the panel for an interesting forward-looking discussion. Thank you very much. And please join us for the coffee break, which is hosted by Evolution Time Critical, and back in the room at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Yeah.